Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to day 2 of Innovate South. As you may be able to tell, whether it's from me being in different clothes or the fact that you're watching this on a YouTube video and not on WebEx, we've had to pre-record this session. So unfortunately, that means that we're not going to have a live Q&A session after this presentation, but we're still going to have a ton of great information provided by our wonderful presenter, Whitney Savoie. Whitney is the Director of Growth at Rader, where she is responsible for growing the bottom line by overseeing sales, marketing, and account management. In this session, Whitney will give some insight on creating a successful go-to-market strategy for those businesses that may be considering entering new markets. All right, Whitney, take it away.
Hey guys, so like Destin said, my name is Whitney Savoie. I am currently the Director of Growth at Rader, which is a company here in Lafayette, Louisiana. We're an MSP, so a managed service provider. We provide services, IT services to companies all over the nation. Prior to working at Rader, I worked for a local startup called Waitr. You may or may not have heard of it. It's a food delivery app. It was started in South Louisiana and then grew very quickly all across the country. So when I started at Waitr, it was this little small startup, and I was there from startup all the way to public, where we were, I had the fortunate opportunity to travel to New York City, ring the bell at the NASDAQ, and so it was a great learning experience through that time. And so what I want to talk to you about today is some of the strategies that we used at Waitr and that I currently use at Rader on how to grow your business, how to go into a new market and be successful at it. And look, there were times that we weren't that successful, but we learned a whole lot along the way. And so I'm going to tell you sort of the good about it and the bad, and the things to look out for and prepare for so that you can be successful whenever you decide to launch out. So the first step in any type of strategy, right, is to research it. So something that we would do at Waitr is that we would decide where we wanted to go. So, you know, what is the next market we want to go to and why? And so we worked with a local organization. At the time, we worked with LEDA, and we gave them criteria of what we felt like would be a successful market based on some of the data that we had already had. And so we wanted small to mid-sized markets all over the Southeast because that was where we wanted to dominate first. And so LEDA gave us this list of all these different cities in the Southeast that fit the criteria that we needed and that we thought would be the most successful route for our company. And so what we would do is we'd build this whole calendar of where we wanted to launch and when, right? And some of the things that we kind of learned along the way was the time of year you launch is very important. And at first we didn't know that, right? We were just like, okay, we're going to go to Alabama at this time. Well, then you start looking at it and you go, oh man, we can't launch in Tuscaloosa, Alabama right now because it's the summer and it's a college town and everybody's gone. And so over time, we started to learn that the time of year of where you pick to go is very, very important. You don't want to launch a new market in a hurricane-prone area in the middle of hurricane season. You don't want to launch a college town in the middle of the summer. You don't want to launch a market in, let's say, Lafayette, Louisiana, in the middle of a huge festival that's going to close off a bunch of streets, depending on your product, obviously. But you want to take in consideration all the things going on in that market when you're building out the where you want to go and the when. Another thing that's very important when determining where you want to go is the competition. Have you researched the competition there and what they provide? And do you add value? So what makes you better than the competition? Are you actually not better, but you want to change the messaging to make it seem like you might be? And so it's all about thinking about the ways to beat the competition when you're thinking about competition and brand positioning. Is it red ocean? Is it blue ocean? And by red ocean and blue ocean, what I mean is it completely saturated? Is the market completely saturated? And even if you win, you won't have enough return to make sense. And so we would look at whether it was blue ocean, if we would be first to market, we knew that we would win. And so that helped us determine the where we would go, right? Behaviors in a market are important about where you go. So if you want to launch, let's say for us, it was a food delivery app, right? If you want to launch a food delivery app in a city where it's very outdoorsy, people don't really order in, they're always out. A good example for us was Asheville. We launched Asheville and realized that really food delivery wasn't a big thing for them. And so we weren't as successful as we could have been had we known that before. And so some of these things we learned after the fact, and that's why I'm sharing with you now, is so that you know kind of some of the things that we did that were mistakes. And then another thing is, who lives there? What is the demographic of the market? Who is my target market? Do they live there? If it is college students, does my product resonate with college students? If not, then I probably need to think about a different option. And so the first step in any successful go-to-market strategy is researching all the different nuances of the market to make sure that it's a product market fit and that it makes sense, because you want to be successful. And look, there's times where you're going to make a mistake. The important part is to learn from it so that you can be more successful the next time. So the next step in the 7 steps to successful market launch is how are you going to pay for it, right? You need to look at your budget and make a realistic budget on what your company can afford to pay for a market launch. Whether you're a startup, whether you're a big corporation, you've got to decide what makes the most sense. And that's all about the return, right? And so how much money do you have and how much of it are you willing to spend and what is your goal? You can be effective truly no matter what your budget is. At Waitr, we would start with a very small budget. In the beginning, we were a startup. There wasn't very much money. And so this may not be very like HR compliant, but we would pile a bunch of people in an Airbnb and walk the streets with a piece of paper telling people, here's what Waitr is, download the app. And so that's how we started, and we didn't have any money. And then over time, as the business started to grow, we were able to add in more complex strategies like, digital and TV and large scale sponsorships with athletes or sponsoring large universities. But in the beginning, we worked with what we had and we were creative, and it was a lot of sweat equity. We would walk around and just talk to people about Waitr and show them our prototype of the app. And so it was a lot of inexpensive, low cost strategies in the beginning. And so no matter what your budget is, there's a strategy that can fit that budget. So the next thing you want to do is you want to set the goal, right? And so it's important that when you set a goal that everybody knows the goal and that it is visible. And so what we would do is we would say, okay, we want to have X amount of orders by launch date. And everybody knew what that number was. And we were all working towards that number. And we would celebrate when we hit it. And so it's important that not only do you have a goal, but that everyone knows the goal. And you're like, oh, that's simple. But sometimes when you're moving very fast and you're launching a market, communication can get lost. So make sure you are communicating what the goal is, what the expectation is, and make it visible. Every single day we had a communication tool that we used, and we were posting the numbers so that everybody could see how close we were to hitting our goal. And if we were really close to hitting our goal, it pushed you. You wanted to go over the goal. Even if you were far away from the goal, it was like, oh man, we got to catch up. We got to change things. And so we would always look at the goals, and we were measuring every single day and determining how we would move forward based on how close we were to that goal, because results matter. That's the whole point of this, right? You want to get results. And so it's very important that they are measurable and visible. You cannot build any type of strategy unless you know what your end goal is. You don't build a strategy without knowing what you're trying to achieve. And I think sometimes we get excited and we're ready to grow, but we're not thinking about the end goal. So always keep the end goal in mind whenever you decide how you're going to do things. And so the next step is to build the strategy. So this takes the longest, right? This requires you working with different departments. And so at Waitr, it was myself working with the sales department and the operations team, because part of the strategy was making sure that we had enough drivers. Did we have enough restaurants in that market? And so it's kind of every department working together. And a strategy takes a long time to build because there's things that you want to test, there's other people involved, there's moving parts. And so this to me is the most robust part, is the building of it, right? And there's a word that's kind of like a buzzword in the startup community and in business in general, and it's scalable. Everyone talks about, is it scalable? Is it scalable? And what I've learned is that there are going to be pieces of a strategy that are scalable, but there's also pieces that may not be scalable, but they're very, very valuable. And so you need to weigh scalability versus the value that that practice brings. And so there were things that we did that weren't necessarily scalable, but they added so much value and they got us to the goal that we were trying to get to, that we would add them into the strategy. Now we had pieces that were scalable and could be duplicated over and over again, but don't ever decrease what value brings, right? Value is important. And don't say, oh, it's not scalable, we shouldn't do it. Sometimes you need to try the things that aren't scalable to see if they work and see how much value they bring to you. You need to start thinking about, during the strategy part, what is your offering? What's your value proposition to this market? Again, when you go back to what you learned about the competitors, let's say, for example, their product is $5. Is yours $4? If it's more, why are they going to pay more? And so that helps you determine the messaging behind all of the messaging that you're going to send out, right? When you start targeting customers and using different channels, your value proposition helps determine the messaging. You want to start creating your content at this point, and you want to make sure that the content is relevant to the market. And so I'm not going to go and launch a market in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where I know it's home of the LSU Tigers, and I'm going to be going, I don't know, go Crimson Tide, right? Because it doesn't resonate. So you want to make sure that your messaging makes sense to the market. You don't want to be talking about Mardi Gras in South Louisiana to a market in Minnesota. They don't know what you're talking about. And so the messaging has to resonate with the lifestyle, the area, the culture that's there. And so that's some of the stuff that I'm talking about that may not be as scalable as you'd like, but it adds value because it makes people understand your company and makes them feel like your company understands them. Another thing that I've learned over time is that the strategy may change once you get into market, right? So always have a plan A, B, C. In the beginning, we didn't do that. We were just like, this is the strategy, let's go execute. And then we get into market and realize, oh man, we definitely missed the ball here. We relied way too much on data and didn't do enough research on how people in the market behaved. And so part of the strategy that we learned eventually was we started talking to people in the market before we got there. We would hire someone in the market and say, tell us about the market. What's the good areas there for us to go and talk to people about the app? What's the best restaurants? Who do the locals love? And so we use the market data and the personal data from that person to help us make decisions, because I think sometimes numbers can lie, or you rely so much on the numbers that you forget about the gut feeling, and using personal experiences to resonate with a market is important, especially when you're not from there, you're not a local company, and you're trying to inundate a market you've never been to. You need to rely on some local insight and knowledge, and that doesn't always come from Google. You need to talk to people there, understand them, because when messaging is relatable, then people relate to your company, and they want to learn about you more. They want to see what you're doing. They want to at least give you a chance, right? So another thing that I've kind of learned is, you're building out this plan, and let's say you're planning out events and parties and all this stuff. Confirm everything. And that seems minuscule, but you may think that you confirmed it once or twice. I used to confirm 2 or 3 times before I even got into the market and say, hey, we have this date set. Are we still good to go? I'm just making sure here's the time our team's going to show up, because a lot of times in these markets, people are busy. But if you're planning any type of event or anything in a market, make sure that you are constantly confirming, that you have everything in writing, and so that you don't get to the market and then realize that, oh man, that manager who approved the event is now out of town for a week and no one here knows what's going on. And so my advice is to always make sure you're confirming and reconfirming and making sure that everything is very organized. So that's kind of the strategy part. Strategy changes, right? From each market, you'll learn what to do and what not to do. And so strategy will change over time. You'll get better. You'll realize things that didn't work the first time that may work the next time. And strategy can be anything from digital to guerrilla style marketing. We did a whole lot of guerrilla style and local tactics at Waitr, and some of those tactics are still happening today at Waitr, where there's a lot of local guerrilla style marketing, digital events, local event, sponsorships. And so strategy can be all encompassing. So the next part of the 7 steps is the do it, right? So you've researched, you've got your budget, you have your goals, you built your strategy, and now you have to go out and execute, okay? So that's making sure your digital is up and running and it's targeted to where you want it to be targeted. So that's double checking and making sure everything is ready to go. Something that I think cannot be said enough is that hard work there's no substitute for hard work, right? And so a lot of people have asked me in the past, how did Waitr grow so quickly? And the truth is, we had a lot of people working very hard. So there's no substitute for hard work. No matter what your strategy is, your budget, whatever, if you are working hard, I'm not going to say I'm guaranteeing that you'll be successful, but I can guarantee you won't be successful if you don't work hard. And so working hard is so important, and having the right people in the right places who are really involved and want to help your business grow, whether that's you or a team or whoever. You've got to be passionate about what you do, because when you're passionate and you're out and you're talking to people about your product, they feel that passion and they want to be a part of something exciting. And so my advice is to find the people that want to work hard for your business and treat them well. And then you go out and work hard and lead by example. I think we had really great leaders who were out working hard, and that made everybody want to get out and work hard, right? We were all in it together. And so the doing it part is when you go out and you're walking the streets in the heat and you're talking to people and you're doing the hard work to make sure that the product resonates. And so, the doing it part is also where you learn a lot. So you'll sometimes get into a market and you'll start to realize, like, man, my messaging is not working. These people don't care about what I'm saying. Maybe I took a misstep by really focusing on this one area of my messaging. And so you may get in market and go, oh man, I need to change the messaging. I need to do it now. We would do that sometimes. And I would be in a market and I would go, oh my gosh, this messaging doesn't work. We got here and we found out something new about the competition. Can you change our digital messaging? And we would do that quickly. We'd have a team who would hurry up and quickly change the messaging on things. And we would change the things we would say to people when we were out talking. And so the messaging can change once you get into the market. And sometimes we would change strategy completely. Let's say I traveled into a market and my whole day was planned around press. I'm going to go visit all of the press and we're going to talk about the product. Well, then we realize, oh my gosh, we don't even have enough drivers to supply this. And so the strategy would change. We go, we've got to get drivers. So we're going to go start talking to colleges about students who might need a job. And so the strategy would change based on the need of the company. And so I'm not saying that you should always have a strategy, but there are times when you need to deviate that makes sense for the business. And so something I would teach my team is, some people want to stick to the structure, right? I said, I'm going to do this today. I'm going to do it. I'm not changing anything. You have to be flexible. When things change, you have to change the strategy so you're successful. If you're stuck on one way and you think it's the only way and it's not working, then you're going to fail. You need to be able to be flexible and think about ways to change a strategy if it's not working while you're there. So the next thing you want to do is you want to learn from it, right? So you've launched this market, you're getting all of your data in to see how you did, and you realize, man, we didn't do as good as we could have done. But I think when you're moving fast, especially in a startup, you want to jump to the next thing, right? But you have to stop after a market launch and really evaluate what went right, what went wrong, what you could have done better, and how you can duplicate the things that did go well, or how you can change the things that did not go well. What can we learn from it? And so something that we learned, again, like I said in the beginning, over time, was when to launch. I remember traveling to Athens, Georgia, and we get there to launch the market, and no one was there. It was a complete ghost town. And so we start talking to people, and they go, oh yeah, no one's here in this city during the summer because it's a college town. And we were like, great, our entire market is basically gone because it's summertime and it's a college town. And so it was a mistake. I remember we launched another city, and it was hurricane season, and a hurricane blew through like 2 days before our launch. And so, you know, we learned over time, like, man, we've got to get better about when we launch markets. And so had we not stopped to learn and evaluate from that, we would have never gotten better. Everything should be documented and then reported out to everybody. Here's the post-launch report. Here's what I want to do next time. Here's what I saw in the market. Here's what data didn't tell me. I remember we had a very, very successful market launch, and we couldn't figure out why. Like, why was this market more successful than any other market? And so after a while of researching and going back and really thinking about it, we realized that we had one person in the market who was a restaurateur who had an email list of 30,000 locals. And he had been emailing out those locals to talk about our product coming to town. And so then we started to realize, like, wow, we need to find a local partner who has connections in the community and start utilizing them to help us help the community with our product. And so had we not stopped to really think and look back at why that market was successful, we would have never come to the conclusion that we needed a local partner. And that's something that continued after we learned from it. We continued to look for a local partner who would help push the brand. And so always stop and think about it and go back and research what you did, why you did it, what went wrong, how to make it better. Because it'll help you and it'll help your business grow and propel to the next level. So the last piece, and you're like, okay, the market launch is done. We've learned from it. Now what, right? And so the next step is to grow that market. And a lot of times we think that a go-to-market strategy stops at launch. You know, you've launched it, it's done. No, there's so much more to it. You've got to continue to grow that market. If you think you've won and then you stop running digital ads, you stop doing the little things that made you successful in the beginning, that's where the market starts to decline. And so don't ever forget about where you've been, right? Continue to love on that market and do the things that helped you be successful. If it was guerrilla style marketing, continue to do that. If it is digital, continue to do digital marketing. If it was traditional, continue to run ads as long as it's within your budget. But don't feel like you've won and then kind of forget about where you've been. It's important to continue to nurture the markets that you launch in so that they continue to grow and that you don't lose market share because you have moved on to other markets. Something that we did that I'd like to share is we hired what we call brand ambassadors, and they're still a part of the company today. And they were mostly college students, I guess, and we would pay them to go out and talk about the brand, and they would do local events, and they had a great customer acquisition cost because we would measure that. And so think about low cost, effective ways that you can stay local, because I truly, truly believe that local marketing matters. I've seen it. When you resonate with a local market, people resonate with your brand. And what I've seen in my experience is that when you stop trying to resonate with the locals, your markets will not grow as much. People love local companies. They want to support local. And if your product supports local, then people want to support you. So I think it's always important to keep those company values at the forefront and support local businesses and do things that help the communities that you're in, because then people want to support you because you're helping them. And so that's very important to me, and I think it should be important to anybody's marketing strategy. Digital, Digital is very important, but I think you have to be wise about how you spend digitally, because you can be spending a whole lot without a whole lot of return. And so measuring digital is very important, making sure you're using the appropriate platforms and that your messaging makes sense. So A/B testing your messaging just to go like, oh, this didn't work, this worked. A/B testing is very important. What else? Let's see. Another thing that we used that was semi-successful, it just kind of depended, was billboards placed in specific locations. And so traditional obviously is radio, TV, billboards, that kind of thing. And so if you're looking into billboards, they are a little bit more expensive. You need to make sure that they're strategically placed. Are they placed in an area where there's a ton of traffic? What does the message on your billboard say? Is it a bunch of little letters, and does it not resonate? And so making sure that your billboards have big words that resonate and not a bunch of tiny words and things that wouldn't make sense to the community. And so changing your messaging to make sense for the community is always very important. And then I guess the last thing that I'll say is that you've got to learn from everything that you do. If you aren't learning, you aren't growing. And so evaluate, change, shift, and do what you think is right. Sometimes data doesn't tell you everything, and so you have to use your gut to make decisions. And so that's something that we would do a lot, is we would make gut decisions. And sometimes they worked out and sometimes they didn't, but we always learned from it. And so my advice is that just go out and do the hard work that it takes to launch these markets, but always learn from it. And I'm willing to answer any questions. I'll have my email here, wsavoie@radersolutions.com. If you have questions afterwards, you can always email me. Destin, do you have any questions you'd like to go over now?
Yeah, I have one extremely important question I want to make sure we answer before we run out of time. We've got a few minutes left. But in my experience, I've met with a lot of startup founders and small business owners who understand that having a go-to-market strategy is paramount, but they just don't feel like they have a big enough budget or any budget to make it work. So if someone in that position came to you, what would you recommend?
So first I would ask them what their budget was, then I'd build the strategy around it. But if it's a small budget, let's say $5,000 to me, which is a very small budget for a market launch, right? My advice would be guerrilla style marketing. It's piling a couple of people up in a car and going into a market and talking to people. There is nothing better in this world to me when it comes to marketing than going out and talking to people about your product. And you obviously need friendly, outgoing people to go do this. You don't want to scare people away with but you go out and you talk to people about the product and see if it even is a product market fit there, But that's something that we did all the time. I would put my little Apple Watch on, and sometimes we would walk 12 miles a day at a launch and just talk to everybody. We would do things like go to every floor of a hospital and talk to all of the nurses, because we knew that nurses work night shift and needed food delivered to them. And so we started thinking about the type of people that would use our product, and that's who we went talk to: nurses, teachers. We would bring donuts. I know this sounds silly, but we would do donut runs where we would buy donuts. Donuts are so inexpensive, and we would bring donuts to every school in the parish or county or wherever we were, and we would talk to the secretary and say, oh my gosh, there's this new product coming to town. You can get food delivered to you. And the secretary talks to all the teachers, and she wants to be in the know. So then she starts telling all the teachers about this great new product that she heard about first. And so we started thinking about how they would use it, and we would use these little low-cost things like donut deliveries, or printing out little paper flyers and inviting people to come out to an event that the restaurant hosted for free. And so look for low-cost, effective ways to do it. And my favorite low-cost way is guerrilla marketing.
That's great information. I think one of the famous entrepreneurs, Steve Blank, says, get out of the office, and he says to do it frequently. And it's a really hard thing for people to do, but for the the benefit that you get for the amount of money that you spend on doing these types of tactics is just it's incredible. So there's nothing that really replaces getting out there, especially when you have bare minimum money, and just talking to people and telling people about your product. So I'm really curious, because you mentioned about a lot of different launches. So what would you say is the most successful city that you launched in, and why do you think it was that city?
So our most successful 100% was Jackson, Mississippi. And we had this restaurateur there that was really involved in the community. He sat on different chambers and boards, and he had this old email list that he had been collecting for years and years and years. I think it was something like 30 years. And he was constantly pushing out a newsletter that the app was coming to town and that his restaurant would be on the app. And we launched on the first day, and the numbers that we wanted to hit, we would normally hit like months later, and we hit on the first day. And I remember driving, delivering food till like midnight, and we had closed at like 10, but there were so many orders that we just kept going. And it was extremely successful from a order standpoint. But when it came to like service, we kind of missed the boat because we had no idea we would, have that many orders that quickly. But it was kind of, to me, the pivotal moment when we realized like, oh man, like this thing is about to explode. And so it was a crazy experience.
So that brings up a good question, I think, about early adopters. And because typically people who adopt a product or an application or whatever early, they kind of have different expectations than someone who waits for it to be perfected, right? So in a situation like that where something blows up unexpectedly, and that's obviously a great problem to have, but where is the fine line between kind of thinking about, all right, well, we have to put a stop here because that's where the quality or like the time it takes for us to get out there or to deliver a product kind of goes down a little bit. Like, do you think it's okay for early adopters because they're just wanting to test it out and use it, so you kind of push that to get them to at least have an experience? Or do you have to kind of pull back the reins a little bit, or have a limit that you hit?
Yeah, we learned that you had to pull back the reins a little bit because the one thing you don't want to do is to deliver a bad experience on the very first time, because it's hard to gain somebody back when they go, I tried it sucked, I'm not using it again. And so we learned a very valuable lesson from that launch. Like, okay, we need to look back at the data and see at what point we needed to kind of turn off the engine, right? And so eventually we started to learn that from the data, but that's where you go back to that learn from it. After we had a very big meeting that was like, here's where we should have stopped. And, it was a great launch from an order perspective, but what about a customer service perspective? Because when it comes to launch, especially for this product in particular, you needed all pieces to be working together for it to be successful. And so it was successful in one, right? And I guess kind of unsuccessful in another. And so we learned, maybe pull the reins back a little bit so that you're delivering a great experience, because you want repeat customers, right? You want to retain the customers that you get, because it costs a whole lot more to get them back once you lost them.
That's a really good point. So one more question is, creativity is kind of is a word. It's different for everybody, like just like art, like how valuable art is or how great art is kind of different to, it's the eye of the beholder, but in your opinion, what were the most creative ways that, you got the word out? And maybe not just for Waitr, but other companies that you've seen maybe recently that have gotten word out about what it is that they're doing. What, have you seen anything that was like super creative that were like, oh, I wish I would have thought of that? And then, for specifically for Waitr, like what were some of the most creative ways that you feel like worked for y'all?
So personally, I like things that are, maybe the word's not controversial, but something that makes you kind of like question it. So that's kind of where my personality always leans. But something that we had done before at Waitr was, it depends on the market, right? And so we launched at Beach City, and we paid for a plane, and the plane flew around with the big banner. And I want to say the promo code we used was like get you some beaches or something. You know, it was like a little controversial, you know, and so it had people talking about it.
Yeah.
And so I kind of always like to lean a little controversial. It depends on the brand, right? I'm not
Mhm.
saying everybody go out and be controversial, but I think depending on your brand, Waitr was a little bit more playful, so we could do playful type things. Um, Something else that I don't know if it was smart. I don't know how creative it was, but we created door hangers for beach cities, and we would put them on condos. And so that people that were in town, they could just pull off this door hanger and had a special promo code. So we would kind of walk and put them all over condos. And that, believe it or not, was one of our highest valued, like the most redeemed coupons or whatever, whenever
Yeah.
we were measuring it. So that was a creative way to do it. And I always like a good promotion, but I think you can promo things to death, and so you have to be wise about how you send out promotions. And so something that we had done at another, I was a director of marketing for an auto group. We actually gave away a vehicle, and that was a really cool promotion. And so you had to come in and register, and so we got people on the lot. That was the goal, right? We wanted people on the lot to see the vehicles. And the press picked it up because we were giving away a car, and we were giving away a car to a student. And it was for every A you got on your report card, your parent could come in and put your name into a bucket, and then we gave this vehicle away to one student. And we traveled to all of the schools in the parish with the vehicle and had
Mhm.
pep rallies, and got people really, really excited about the fact that one lucky student who had been excelling in school and really trying to get A's, it might have been A's and B's in their report card, got their name into a drawing, and they won the vehicle. And so that was a really fun, creative promotion. But I think getting out in the community and talking to people, again, I keep saying that, but that's important. And when we went to those little pep rallies and stuff, there was always press. The teachers were talking about it. And so it created a buzz. And I think creating a buzz is important, a positive buzz, right? There's
Yeah.
got enough negativity in the world. Let's create a
Yeah.
positive, fun buzz around your brand.
Yeah, I think that the grading one for the automotive, promotion was fantastic, because that's an experience that I think even today, a lot of kids, young adults are experiencing with their families is, hey, you make good grades, you hit these marks, you hit these milestones, I'll help you buy a car, so they're already kind of experiencing that with their family, and then it just kind of adds to that experience already.
Yep.
So it's a concept that's pretty easy, but it also promotes like a really good cause, like education, and purpose. And I think those sort of things are a good way to, kind of like you mentioned earlier, give back to the community, get involved in community, and show that you care about the community, because you're promoting something really good that helps build the community, not just trying to give something away for free, but what you're doing causes a good effect, that lasts over time for the community. So I think that's a really great example as well. Um,
I think giving
so
back is important. Giving back to the communities that you're going to be involved in is so important. And I get that not every brand has the budget to do that, but when you do, if you do, I absolutely believe that it's important to be involved in the communities that you're trying to inundate.
yeah, absolutely. Probably at least top five
For
things
sure.
that I would tell any startup or any company that's just starting out, small business or not, get involved in the community, because that's one of the best ways to get that word of mouth out there.
Agreed.
So thank you so much for your time, Whitney. This is fantastic information. I'm so glad we were able to have you come and still present, even though we were having to pre-record this. I think it's still great information. And hey, if anything, people can also come back to it later and reference it. So it's even better than doing it live in a sense, in some ways. But, if you have more questions for Whitney, you can ask her through email. You can always send her directly. Or if you want to reach out to us with any questions, and there's anything that, we feel Whitney would be fantastic at answering, we'll make sure to get it patched through her as well. So I do want to give a quick recognition to our partners of innovation. We have Cox Business, Lafayette Economic Development Authority, Opportunity Machine, and Rally Marketing. We could not put on this event without partnering with all those organizations. And I mean, I hope that all of you on the second day of Innovate South are really enjoying it by now, and really getting out a lot of that out of it. So one quick reminder, don't forget to check out the description box down below if you're viewing this on YouTube for a link for our next session, or you can visit innovatesouth.org to view the rest of the schedule. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you in the next session.